What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. Now, the Detroit Lions yesterday on Thanksgiving Day played host to the Houston Texans in their annual Thanksgiving tradition football game. You know, they do this game every single year. They always host a team at Ford Field, and it is a Thanksgiving tradition in Detroit to watch the football game. Now, unfortunately, the game did not go quite as planned for the Detroit Lions, and to say the game was underwhelming or disappointing would be an understatement at the least. But just like every single Lions game, after every Lions matchup, whether we win, whether we lose, or whether we draw the football game, I will be here telling you the stats, going over the recap, and going over the major takeaways from the football game so that you know everything and all the important things about the game. Now, before we get into this video, before we get into recapping this Week 12 matchup, if you are new to the channel and are enjoying this Detroit Lions content, please consider liking the videos and subscribing to the channel. It only takes 2 seconds out of your day and it helps the channel out more than you could know. So if you could do that, I'd be greatly appreciative for it. But without any further ado, let's get into recapping this Week 12 matchup because there's a lot to go over and there's a lot of interesting takeaways from this football game. Now, starting with the passing attack, Matt Stafford on the day yesterday was okay. He wasn't great. He was 28 of 42 for 295 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 1 interception. The interception I still don't think was necessarily Stafford's fault. The Texans were sending a blitz. Stafford had to get rid of it early. You know, if he floated the ball anymore to get over J.J. Watt's hands, the cornerback would have got back into play and probably would have intercepted it anyway. And, you know, if Stafford held on to the ball any longer, he would have got hit by the blitzing defenders. So I don't put that on Stafford too much. I know some people do. Some people say he could have got that over, but I just think that was, you know, a very tough play for Stafford, and he just got very unlucky that J.J. Watt, a great defender, was able to get his hands on it and pick the ball off. Now, again, Matthew Stafford did not have a horrible day. He was still 28 of 42, 295, and a touchdown with that interception, of course. So it wasn't horrible, but wasn't really great. Nobody had a great day for Detroit yesterday. Nobody really had anything crazy. He also had a really nice trick play, Matt Stafford did, where I think he caught the ball. I think he had a receiving touchdown, or at the very least caught the ball at the 1. But, you know, the refs didn't see it that way. The refs told him he did not catch the football. I disagree. Still a really fun trick play to see from the Lions on Thanksgiving, though, and still a fantastic and phenomenal effort by Matt Stafford to even get close to pulling that ball in double coverage while getting hit in the head. I commend him for that. He showed some toughness, he showed some grit, and he showed some fight yesterday, and for that, I can never ever discredit a player for giving effort. Now, looking at the rushing attack was all right yesterday. Adrian Peterson had 15 carries for 55 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Kerryon Johnson yesterday also got quite involved in the rushing attack with 11 carries for 46 yards, 0 touchdowns, but averaged 4.2 yards a carry. The running game was good yesterday, but I don't think it was utilized quite enough. Yes, both running backs got 10 plus carries, both major running backs did, but 10 of those carries came on the opening drive of the second half where the Lions ran it 10 straight times, and it worked, funnily enough. It worked over and over and over again. The Houston Texans really could not stop it, but then they kind of strayed away from it after that. So yes, the running backs both got 10 plus carries, but a lot of those numbers are inflated off of just that one singular drive. Still a great day by the Lions, still a great day by Kerryon and Adrian Peterson, but, you know, it's not like we were consistently running it through the entire game. It just so happened we had a couple stretches here and there where we ran it over and over and over again, and in those stretches it did seem to work, but the Lions did not stick with it long enough. Now, moving over to the receiving game, moving over to the receivers on the day, T.J. Hockenson led all receivers with 5 receptions for 89 yards, got really involved early, was on record pace early in the football game, and got phased out by Darrell Bevell, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Kerryon Johnson had a really good receiving day on top of his good running day. He had 4 receptions for 52 yards through the air. Marvin Jones contributed 6 catches, which led the team for 48 yards, and Mohamed Sanu, the recently signed wide receiver, had 4 receptions for 32 yards and a touchdown. He also had 1 more big catch where, you know, good running catch after he caught the ball. Good effort play, got a lot of yards, and it got called back for a very weak pass interference. So, you know, that play did not count, but he also had that play on top of it. Really good day from Mohamed Sanu. Sanu, he played a really good football game for coming straight off the bench, straight off the practice squad, so that was really good to see. All around, I didn't think our offense was horrible. Obviously, there were some stretches, there were some things I wish were fixed, which we'll get into in a minute in the takeaways, but overall, I didn't think any individual player had a poor football game. I didn't think from an individual perspective there was anybody that I felt like was really letting the team down yesterday on the offensive side of the ball. And, you know, from that perspective, especially after getting shut out last week, especially after getting shut out last Sunday, you know, this was an improvement. This was a better football game from the offense, and there wasn't really one player that I can look to and say that he let the football team down yesterday. Now, looking at the defensive performance from yesterday, the rushing defense was actually pretty solid. The Detroit Lions only allowed 77 rushing yards on the day, which is not a bad stat line at all. However, the passing attack or the passing defense cannot say the same, as they allowed over 315 yards and 4 touchdowns to Deshaun Watson and the Texans receiving corps. Was not a good game from that perspective, was not a good game from the secondary's perspective, but I don't think it was 100% on the players, but I also, you know, obviously you got to contribute some of that to the players as well. The passing defense wasn't very good. They allowed a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns, and at the end of the day, they were the reason that, you know, they were the reason that we lost, to be totally honest. So that is unfortunate, but those are the stats from the game. Those are the, you know, statistics. The offense did not have a horrible day, didn't have a great day, but it wasn't horrible. The rushing defense was really good. The passing defense was not very good. That's what you got to know from this game. Now, moving on to the major takeaways, the interesting part about this video, and the, you know, the big takeaways that, you know, happened on the field, and the big takeaways that I had from this game. Now, my first takeaway is that I believe this was Matt Patricia's final stint with the Detroit Lions. I believe this was his final coached game. I believe we have seen the end of the Patricia era in Detroit. Now, I have a couple reasons for this. The first reason I have is that Patricia was very emotional on the sidelines, both before the game, during the national anthem, as well as throughout the game. Every time they panned to him, especially the later in the game it got, especially the larger the deficit became from the Lions and the Texans, you could just see it on Matt Patricia's face. He was not happy. He looked like he was about to cry. He was tearing up a little bit. He looked very, very upset and very, very emotional, and that could be that could be part of it, just being it's a holiday, and, you know, he obviously wanted to win on the holidays and, you know, enjoy his holiday weekend. That could be part of it, but I have not seen Matt Patricia like that before. I have not seen him that emotional, that upset, that seeming, you know, that ready to just kind of break out and kind of cry a little bit. You know, I've not seen him like that before, and I truly think that I think that Sheila told him that if he doesn't win on Thanksgiving, he would not be the head coach for much longer. And I think that, you know, he showed that emotion on the field. And unfortunately for him, his defense and his team didn't show up for him, and he did not coach a good enough football game to remain the head coach. Obviously, as of recording this, he is still the head coach, but I do not think that will be the case much longer. Now, in his press conference, he also was talking very short term. They asked him about, you know, being the head coach next season, being the head coach even next week. And he said, I'm just taking it day by day. That's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to do things now. And, you know, he's always, you know, generally Matt Patricia talks about the future. Generally, he doesn't speak about, you know, short term. Generally, he talks about next week. Generally, he talks about, you know, moving on to next week, moving on to the next week's opponent. And yesterday, he talked about day by day. He talked about the next day. And I've never seen Matt Patricia talk like that before. I've never heard him talk like that before. So, you know, when he goes from, yeah, we're going to focus on next week's opponent, they played a great game, but it's time to move on. And you go from that, from we got to take it day by day, that makes me think that his time is extremely limited in Detroit. So if you're a Patricia hater, if you don't want Patricia here anymore, your wish might be granted very, very soon. I believe this was Patricia's last football game as the head coach of the Lions. Now, my second takeaway from the game is that this secondary was atrocious, but I don't think it was all on the players. Now, the Houston Texans, for all their flaws and all of their faults, they have a great quarterback in Deshaun Watson, and they have some very fast and very good wide receivers in Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller. Now, Will Fuller, of course, is the wide receiver that torched Amani a bunch of times. He torched everybody pretty much throughout the game. You know, our wide receiver, or our cornerbacks just were not fast enough to keep up with Will Fuller. They really weren't fast enough to keep up with Brandon Cooks either. Both of them, you know, torched our defense for big yardage and big plays over and over and over again. And some of that is on the players. Some of that you can play better technique. You can play better, you know, strategy-wise. You can back off a little bit. You can give a little bit more cushion. And you can play wide receivers like that a little bit differently. So some of that is on the players. Some of them, you know, Amani's got to get contact a little bit more often. He's got to press. He's got to knock him off his spot a little bit. bit, him being Will Fuller. Got to knock Will Fuller off his spot a little bit right off the snap and be aggressive and physical. And when Amani did that, I thought he played a very good game. But when he didn't do that, he tended to get run past just because Will Fuller is really, really fast. And Amani is not really fast. That's not a fault of Amani. That's just a little bit of a weakness in his game. Will Fuller runs a 4.2. Amani does not. That's just a fact. That's just not a shot at Amani or Awarie, not a fault of his. He's just not as fast as Will Fuller, and the coaching staff needs to realize that. If Will Fuller is going against a significantly slower cornerback that clearly can't keep up with him in just straight man coverage, you need to give Amani some safety help. You need to give him some help over the top, or whichever cornerback is guarding Will Fuller. You have to give him some safety help over the top, so if he does get beat, if maybe he doesn't get the greatest contact, if he does get blown by, then you have that safety over the top so that Deshaun Watson either doesn't throw it or he throws it into a very tight and very tough window to throw it in, where we have a much better chance of breaking it up or even intercepting the pass. Yes, Amani got beat, and yes, that is on him. He could have played better technique. He could have handled certain situations better. But again, some of that falls on the coaching staff. If you know your cornerback isn't fast enough to win a foot race with Will Fuller, you give him some safety help over the top so that he doesn't have to win a foot race. He doesn't have to beat Will Fuller in a foot race, and then you don't give up those big play touchdowns to Will Fuller in back-to-back in like 3 minutes apart from each other. If you give Amani, if you give some of the other cornerbacks a little bit of help over the top, or you play just a little bit more cohesive defense as a team and you give your players help and you put them in the right position to succeed, then we likely don't see the game get as out of hand as we saw it yesterday. Now, my third takeaway from the game is that the play calling yesterday was much better at times. Darrell Bevell pulled out some tricks from his bag. He pulled out some really interesting formations and some really interesting plays from his bag of tricks. Obviously, we saw that double flea flicker, that double reverse flea flicker where, Stafford pitched it forward or, turned it around and handed it to Agnew, and then Agnew handed it to somebody else. Somebody pitched it back to Stafford. Big play down the field to TJ Hawkinson for, obviously a big passing play. That was good to see. We saw the, reverse to Jamal Agnew, who threw a really good pass to Matt Stafford, who, obviously Matt Stafford showed a lot of fight and a lot of heart and, did a really good job tracking the football and almost brought it in for a touchdown on the, he almost had a receiving touchdown in the game, which would have been huge. The play calling was better. They ran the ball effectively at times, as I said at the beginning of that second half. They ran the ball 10 consecutive times and drove straight down the field without much resistance from the Houston Texans. The play calling was not bad all around. There was some good moments of play calling in this game, but it was way too inconsistent. It was not consistent enough. It was not good enough throughout the entire game. And Darrell Bevell, for all the good he did in that game, he had a lot of bad. He did not give his hot hand. He did not give the ball to players that were having a good game. He phased players out even though they were showing a lot of fight and they were having good games in themselves, like Kerryon Johnson and TJ Hawkinson. Darrell Bevell was better in this game, but he wasn't consistent enough in this game. He did not keep the ball in the hands of his playmakers. He was good, he was better, but he wasn't good enough for this team, and I will give him credit where it is due. He had a much better game plan this week. He played much better football. He called a much better football game, but again, it still wasn't quite good enough for this Lions team to be successful. My fourth and final takeaway from this week's game is that the right players did not get the ball. The right players did not get the football, and there's a couple players on both sides of the football that I think just they were having good games. They were on really good pace to have some really good numbers, and then all of a sudden they got phased out of the game plan for no in particular reason. The first player I want to mention is TJ Hawkinson. He was on record pace for a tight end in receiving yards in the game. After the first quarter, or after the first couple drives, he had 70-something receiving yards, I think after the first drive or second drive of the football game. And he was on record pace to set a tight end record for most receiving yards in a football game, and he ended up with one more catch for 10 more yards or something. He got phased out of the game plan. He got screens early, he got a deep pass early, he got involved early and made plays happen, and then all of a sudden, after that pick six by Matt Stafford, he got phased out of the game plan. We never went back to TJ, and when we did, it was on a 1 yard out, and he either dropped it or he got tackled for 1 yard. It was not a good game plan. TJ started the game super hot, super on fire, and for some reason, Darrell Bevell in the second half, and even late in the first half, just phased TJ Hawkinson out of the game when he was on a really good pace and having a really, really good football game. Kerryon Johnson is another example. Kerryon Johnson had 98 scrimmage yards on the game during, in just the first half. Or, I believe he had like 80 something in the first half, had a couple really nice runs on the first drive of the second half. He had 98 yards going onto the second drive of the second half. So, obviously that first drive we go down, I think we get a field goal out of it. And then the second drive, starting that second drive, he had 98 yards of total yardage. And he did not get a touch after that first drive. He did not get back on the field except to pass block. That is unacceptable. That is not okay. Kerryon Johnson was probably the best offensive player. He was having the best offensive game yesterday from a yardage standpoint, and I think would have had a couple touchdowns if he was given the opportunity over Adrian Peterson. Kerryon was having a really good game and got phased out of the game plan, which, made our offense more stagnant. It made our offense a little less efficient, made our offense a little worse, and you could see as a result, the offense stopped scoring points. They weren't effective. They weren't efficient anymore, and all of a sudden, the offense, clogged up, the offense stalled, and the offense couldn't get going again because they took the best player and the players that were having the best game in TJ Hawkinson and Kerryon Johnson, and they took them out of the football game. Darrell Bevell took them out of the football game and just phased them out completely and didn't give them a chance to make an impact. Same goes for Jarrad Davis on the defense. He got a sack early. He had a couple nice plays early in the football game, and he even, I believe, almost had a forced fumble or did have a forced fumble late in the football game when he was put back in. Like, Jarrad Davis made plays and had a really good football game when he was in, but he was very limited on his snap count. He was very limited in what he was allowed to do and how long he was allowed to play. And Matt Patricia and Corey Undlin just need to put Jarrad Davis in, because every time he's in, he makes plays. Every time he's in, he does the right thing, and he does good things for this football team. But again, he was on a very limited snap count, and in those limited snaps, he still made plays, but then as soon as he made a play, he was put right back on the bench and not allowed to play anymore. How do you make that decision? How, after a player gets a third down sack, do you say, okay, you're not going to go back in until the fourth quarter, although you just made probably the biggest play of the football game so far? How does that happen? How do you make that decision if you're Matt Patricia or Corey Undlin? Now, those are my takeaways from the games. Those are my takeaways. I just, this game was not a very good one. There's a lot of negatives to look at. There's a couple positives. The play calling was a little better and a little bit, more exciting. But other than that, it was a pretty disappointing football game. This week, I do want to give out a couple of game balls. My offensive game ball does go to Kerryon Johnson. Again, he had 98 scrimmage yards without really a second half touch. He played a really good game. He had a phenomenal game, stepped up in a big role when he needed to. Obviously, Adrian Peterson was the starting back, but Kerryon got his carries, he got his touches, and made the most of it. I think if we continue to feed Kerryon the ball, I think he has a really good football game. And, I think Kerryon yesterday showed that he can still be a vital and very big part of this offense. I think he can be a really good player in this offense for a long time. And, especially if Adrian Peterson is gone next season, especially if he retires or if the Lions just decide not to bring him back, I think Kerryon Johnson can take over and still be a vital and very big piece of this offensive game plan every single week. And then my defensive game ball goes to Danny Shelton. I thought Danny Shelton played a phenomenal game. He had several really big run stops, several big stuffs on the goal line. He played a really good game. He played a very solid game. I felt like every time we needed a play in the run game, Danny Shelton showed up and he made a big play. And for that, he gets my defensive game ball. Again, the defense had a really good day on the rushing defensive side. They only gave up 77 yards. Danny Shelton was a big part of that. So for me, he gets my defensive game ball and KJ gets my offensive game ball. But with all that being said, that is all I got for you guys today. That is my Week 12 recap. The game was disappointing. The players were disappointing. The coaches were disappointing. And I think this was Matt Patricia's last game in Detroit. To be totally honest, I think this was Matt Patricia's last coach game as a Detroit Lion. But with all that being said, that is all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. If there is Lions news before tomorrow, then I will obviously make a video letting every single person know. But until then, that is all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you all tomorrow with more Lions content. Thank you all for watching. Bye, guys.